I turned one of my favorite Silksong environments into a full nail set. Hi, hello! My name is Tara and I am the owner of Tiara Nails, where I create punk and gothic inspired nails. Today is my first video on YouTube and I am focused on something very personal to me, the game I've played a lot of times, which is Hollow Knight Silksong. I hope you enjoy this nail set, and don't forget to like and subscribe. For this set, I really wanted to focus on the Citadel Chambers, which is on the north side of the map, the area I'm showing right here. Before starting the nails, I designed a concept set inspired by this area. The first design I wanted to focus on was the Grand Gate. The scale and architectural details of this area immediately stood out to me, so I wanted the nail to reflect that same structured and monumental feeling. For the airbrush colors, I actually mix acetone with gel polish instead of using regular airbrush paints. It thins the gel enough to work through the airbrush while still keeping the pigment really strong. So I didn't need to buy separate airbrush gel colors for this. I wanted these nails to have that same heavy, structured feeling, so I focused a lot more on texture instead of keeping everything super smooth and polished. For some of the sculptural details, I used silicone molds with a softer gel because I didn't want the pieces to cure completely stiff. I wanted them to keep a little flexibility while still holding their shape. A lot of the smaller details were added pretty slowly throughout the process, just so the nails stayed balanced and didn't start feeling too busy. When I used chrome on the sculpted pieces, it actually held on because I used gel polish for my molds, and it helped the chrome grip to the surface way better and made everything look smoother and more reflective. And we are moving on to the next one. One of the things that I really like about this area is that everything feels so massive, layered, and really detailed without feeling overcrowded. For the scale design, I treated the middle nail as the main body and then continued the shape outward to the surrounding nails on right and left. And for the background behind the scale, I added some stamp details just to bring in more texture and tie everything together from every angle. The airbrush also helped blend the darker tones together, so the details felt more built into the nail instead of sitting on top of it. I also made one side slightly higher and the other lower, so the design had that movement instead of looking too perfectly symmetrical. This is the finished result, and look at these three nails together. The next nail I wanted to focus on was Hornet, since she's the center of the whole set. For the background, I used the airbrush again to create the red to orange gradient because I wanted this nail to feel warmer and more alive compared to the heavier stone nails from earlier. I added a soft white aura behind Hornet using a thin liner brush to separate her from the background and make the design feel less flat. For the smaller white details, I used a cleaning brush to lightly spread the gel across the nail. It creates these soft little dots that add more texture and dimension without making the background feel too busy. For Hornet's dress, I wanted to feel more dynamic and almost like she was moving upward toward us. So I used one of my silicone molds with red gel polish to create flexible sculpted pieces. Using gel polish instead of a harder gel gave me more flexibility to shape the petals the way I wanted. I lifted certain sections higher and lower so the dress had more movement and helped create the illusion of Hornet looking up toward the viewer instead of laying flat against the nail. For Hornet's head, I used solid extender gel mixed with white pigment and sculpted everything by hand by using a few different tools. Once the shape was cured, I went back in with a file to sharpen the horns and smooth out the edges a little more. I added the eyes using black gel polish and assembled all the pieces together. There was still a visible gap underneath the dress once everything was attached, so I used caulking gel to fill the space underneath without it being visible from the top view. And this is how the final Hornet nail turned out. You can't really have Hornet without her needle. So this nail was designed to sit right beside her and continue that part of the character across the set. I kept the base very similar to Hornet's nail by using the airbrush again for direct to orange gradient, so both designs still felt connected visually. I also added the same soft texture in the background using a cleaning brush to spread out the smaller white details, along with a thin liner brush for the aura behind the needle. I sealed everything with a matte top coat before starting the needle itself. For the shape, I used builder gel mixed with black gel polish, and slowly build up the layers to create more dimension instead of having the needle look completely flat against the nail. After shaping everything, I covered the needle with silver chrome. Since the background was matte, the chrome only attached to the sculpted needle and stayed completely clean around the rest of the nail. And this is how the final needle-inspired nail turned out. For this nail, I wanted to focus on the resting bench from the Citadel Chambers area. I started with a black base and used white airbrush color to build that soft ambience in the background. I also use stamps throughout the nail to recreate some of the texture and atmosphere from the environment itself. Using acetone around certain areas helped remove some of the airbrush color and gave me more control over where I wanted the darker tones to stay. I lightly airbrushed over the stamp details afterward, so everything blended more naturally into the background. I covered the nail with a lighter pink gel shade to match the softer atmosphere I wanted for this design. I added darker tones around the edges and bottom of the nail to create more depth and make the lower section feel like ground underneath the bench. Near the top of the nail, I used cat eye gel to create a soft light reflection. And for the ground details, I used a liner brush to build layer lines and blend them downward for more texture. For the sculpted pieces, I used gel polish inside silicone molds because the flexibility helped the pieces sit against the nail more naturally. Compared to the heavier architectural parts of the set, this location felt a lot calmer and more atmospheric. I combined a few molds together to create the bench shape and covered the details with gold chrome to match the rest of the set. I finish everything off with darker airbrush shading around the edges and small white details across the nail to add more atmosphere and dimension. And And this is our final resting bench. The next nail was inspired by the Citadel Spa, which is honestly one of my favorite areas from the game. Compared to the darker parts of the Citadel, this one feels softer and calmer, and very cute, especially with Sherma relaxing in the pool. I started with the same black base and white airbrush background to keep the atmosphere consistent with the rest of the set. Then layered a lighter pink shade over it to match the softer look of the area. For the water, I used a light cream color to map out the shape first. Then added 2 coats of pink gel underneath. After that, I mixed white with top coat gel to create a milky translucent color and layered it over the pink without curing it right away. While the gel was still wet, I used my dotting tool with clear gel to create texture across the surface. So the water looked softer and more dimensional once cured. I added white detailing around the edges of the pool to separate the water from the rest of the nail. I also used black sponge shading around the area for more depth. Between the water and the darker background, I used white with a sponge to create a soft steam effect around the pool. For Sherma, I used my dotting tools to build the shape using 2 different colors. Then refine the details with a liner brush to add more dimension around the face, eyes, and the small part of the clothing visible above the water. I also added a little more white around Sherma to make it feel like steam was surrounding the character. Once the base design was finished, I started adding sculptural details around the nail using different silicone molds that matched the atmosphere of the area. I covered the sculpted pieces with gold chrome and slowly built up the layout around the pool and lamp details. I wanted to create the effect of water flowing into the pool, so I sculpted a small pipe. water pipe, I added white dots leading down into the water to create that illusion. And look at this final look with Sherma swimming in there. For this nail, I wanted to focus on the chains throughout the Citadel Chambers, especially the ones Hornet uses to move higher. I started with a black base and covered the nail with metallic gold chrome to create that rich golden look. After that, I used black airbrush shading around the sides and corners of the nail to darken everything down and match the atmosphere of the Citadel. I wanted the center of the nail to stay brighter while the edges faded darker, so the chains would stand out more once they were added. I also used my cleaning brush to lightly spray small white details across the nail. I cut real chain pieces down to different lengths and placed them across the nail to create a little more movement instead of keeping everything perfectly symmetrical. For the bell details at the bottom, I used half-round gold gems to recreate that same hanging bell look from the game environment. And this is the final look. One of my favorite details throughout the area is the repeating gold structures and shapes you see across the environment. So I wanted these nails to capture more of that general atmosphere. I started with the same black base and added white airbrush in the center to create that soft glow effect that ties in with the rest of the set. I used gold chrome over parts of the nail, mainly focusing on the darker areas so the gold had more of a rusty, aged look instead of feeling overly clean and reflective. For the lines, I used black builder gel and slowly built the shape in multiple rolls to create more dimension and movement across the nail. Once everything was cured, I covered the details with gold chrome to bring back that signature Citadel look. I'm really happy with how all the different elements came together while still keeping the same Citadel atmosphere throughout. That is the final set inspired by Citadel Chambers from Hollow Knight Silksong. I hope you liked this video and make sure to let me know in the comments if there's any other environment in the game you would like me to do next, or if you have any other games in mind. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share.